The UN Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists and the issue of impunity addresses fundamental aspects of prevention, protection, and prosecution. Those are triple P's. For some of you who have been involved in the national mechanism of safety of journalists, you must have come across the triple P. The plan was a result of a process that began in 2010 upon the request of UNESCO's Intergovernmental Program for the Development of Communication, in bracket IPDC. Are journalists protected internationally? Article 79 formally states that journalists engaged in dangerous professional missions in the zones of armed conflict are civilians within the meaning of Article 50, subsection 1. As such, they enjoy the full scope of protection granted to civilians under international humanitarian law. What is the International Convention on Safety and Independence of Journalists? The purpose of the present convention is to promote, protect, and ensure the safety of journalists and other media professionals in times of peace and during armed conflict, and to safeguard their ability to exercise their professional conduct freely and independently in an enabling environment without facing any harassment. The UN Security Council Resolution Quadro 2, or the protection of journalists, media professionals, and associated personnel in armed conflicts of 2015. This resolution recalls that journalists, media professionals, and associated personnel engaged in dangerous professional missions in areas of armed conflict shall be considered as civilians and shall not be the subject of attack on reprisals arising. The resolution also urges the immediate and unconditional release of journalists, media professionals, and associated personnel who have been kidnapped or taken hostage in situations of armed conflict. The UN Convention to protect journalists. Despite many journalists looking at the protocols and guidelines and proposes that would help them off the dangers, they still face daily threats, and impunity continues to make the situation worse, and Uganda is no exception. In the last 6 years, more than 600 journalists have been killed. Over 9 of the 10 cases that occur in various regions remain unpunished. Impunity reigns. Hundreds of journalists are imprisoned on a daily basis. They are attacked, beaten, detained, harassed, and threatened. There is growing threats everywhere, especially to digital safety or cyber attacks, hacking, online harassment, especially on women journalists, all together creating a safety crisis for news professionals. It is this and a growing frustration with the lack of action, and in too many cases, a lack of will to tackle the crisis of impunity, which has driven global journalists, bodies like the International Federation of Journalists, to launch a campaign for an international convention dedicated purposely for the protection of journalists and media workers globally. FDC presidential candidate Patrick Amuriat spoke on radio before it was switched off in Lira. It must have been Lango FM. The journalists were briefly arrested, detained for hosting him. November 18, 2020. Saif Allah Ashraf Kasirye. Before facing the last attack that was fatal, he was first beaten, pepper sprayed, and detained briefly for covering Bobi Wine, the presidential candidate. November 18, 2020, Samu Balikowa of City FM and Nile TV in Jinja was arrested while covering the arrest of Bobi Wine near Njero, but released later after being detained. The same day, November 18, 2020, John Bosco Mwesigwa was sacked from his job at City FM on accusations of writing pro-opposition stories. Actually, there was some influence peddling from external, some invisible hand which said, you sack that journalist, he's pro-opposition. Then December 10, 2020, the Media Council of Uganda directed all practicing journalists in Uganda to register for accreditation or risk losing the right to cover the 2021 elections and the other official events. And we refused to register. How many registered? Did you register? December 15, 2020, UCC asked Google to close at least 14 YouTube channels for allegedly mobilizing riots that resulted in the death of more than 50 people and left several others injured. They did not look at the YouTube, the other side, that it was helping to expose some violations, human rights violations, but they were looking at only the other side of the coin. December 16, there was another one where now it was your team. It warned that they will block all uncredited journalists from covering political events and campaigns. Now, January 13, 2021, the internet was shut down. We woke up one morning and we could not access anything ahead of the general elections. Security agencies should protect journalists and allow media practitioners to execute their duties without fear or favor. And lastly, Uganda police should respect fundamental principles that govern freedom of expression and freedom of the media and help the journalists execute their duties without fear or favor.
Leave the shoes. Sit down. Can you sit down? Down. Yeah, down. What? Wait.
What is paining me is that these guys are on duty. They are not partisan. You are recording, you are videotaping, and all of a sudden somebody is targeting you in the course of your work. This is what is hurting, because it's a normal job you are doing, and the focus is to give out information to the public, no matter the nature of information. But at the end of it all, somebody say, oh, that's the journalist. And that's enough label to target you. You get it?
Oh. What is that? The list. In human rights, violation of one person is as bad as violation of 1,000. So even if it was one journalist who was beaten or killed, it is still a grave matter. But you were reading the names and whatever, and some of those I didn't know about. So I'm asking myself, how much did we do as the media to document and publicize these incidents? Even use them to blackmail. Blackmail not is in quotations. Yes, we have a document of people who have been beaten, of people who have been killed, and you are using evidence to go and from office to office, finding what you can do about it. So journalists are known not to cover their own issues. But I think we have an advantage in doing campaigns against these things by showing. I mean, if Ugandans will also be concerned if you tell them that 30 journalists have been killed. How many journalists are in Uganda? There are few. So let's document. Let's publicize. Let's cover aggressively the matters that concern journalists. Then negotiations. Those negotiations, okay, they may seem good for the individual journalist that has been affected, but in the long run, they are bad for the profession. Because one, if you are negotiating with the person who has beaten you, you are already, in terms of power, you are the beggar. Okay, you are inferior. So you cannot get a good deal whatsoever. But most importantly, if a case went to court and we got pronouncements from court, we got jurisprudence from court, we can get collective protection for all journalists. So for me, that's the problem I have with the negotiations. They beat this one, they negotiate quietly. Apart from, I think the last pronouncement, good pronouncement for the profession from the courts, was the late Justice Mulenga. Imagine, I think that is how many years ago. We have not had a case from court which can really provide collective responsibility. Collective protection.
Because you silence the media, nobody is speaking to each other and will not get to know what is happening in this country. I'd like to make a passionate appeal to the government of Uganda to recognize the role of the media, to recognize that without the media we cannot go that far. And if we keep on intimidating the press from any other corner, it would mean that eventually the profession called media or journalism in this country will die. So if the journalism profession dies in this country, it means a blackout. It means no development will take place. We shall live in fear, and definitely development in this country will be affected. I'd also want to end by saying that the safety of journalists, the safety and security of journalists in this country is the safety and security of the government, but it is also the safety and security of Uganda as a whole. We need to appreciate each other. We are a fourth estate, and we need to complement whatever we are doing.
Is a professional standards unit in the police, report there. There is what she told you, the office of the DPP or DPP, report there. There is the office, my office. I run the Directorate of Human Rights and Legal Services in the police. There are people who write to me directly when they have had issues. And I cause investigations into these matters. Report some criminal, if it's against police officers, professional, disciplinary, we have our own court system. And it is serious. We really want to stamp out impunity. I know, for example, that there was an officer who was caught beating up a journalist. I know they charged him in the criminal court. I know he, I think, at the end of the day, lost his I don't want to mention names, but justice has already been what? Served. If you don't come out and speak, then we shall never know what really happened. Number two, journalists should also work with the police, especially in highly volatile situations, because the journalists stage, I've been watching, there have been riots in these Western countries, but you see where the journalists usually stand. They are either designated or they are with the what? They are with the police. But if you come and take sides and stand here, stand there, you get caught up in a crossfire where police is trying to legally quell a potentially riotous situation, because police has procedures. If they assess that this situation is going to be riotous, there are legal mechanisms of trying to quell the situation, tear gas, those things. And normally I've seen journalists end up being recipients of these things, but which is not the intention of the police. We have a whole policy on human rights and how we intend to protect the human rights of all citizens, including journalists. It's there. I don't know, I was talking to our PRO before I came and said probably we should start putting these things there. People don't know that we have a whole policy on human rights. Nobody should be beaten. It's not fact from our commander-in-chief. He has made it clear in writing. You shouldn't touch anybody. There's no reason to beat what? Anybody.